Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our third of 5 sessions on human flourishing. Today, we're going to be looking at pro-social flourishing, this notion that life and evolution are inherently cooperative, not competitive. Before we do that, I want to continue my reflections on Gaza. Today is Valentine's, essentially a Western, but increasingly global holiday as people express their love for one another. Normally, it's in a romantic sense. Today, however, I want to offer some just reflections from a guilty bystander, as it were, on love in a time of genocide. What does that mean? What does Valentine's connote, refracted through the prism of mass murder? There's probably very little romance going on in Gaza today, as over half of the Palestinian population huddles in tents or in the open air, hungry, without sanitation, constant fear of snipers and random bombings. So as I was thinking about Valentine's in Gaza, the following occurred to me. I think probably the greatest love that's taking place is love of family. You know, we see it on the Israeli side with the intense expressions of solidarity with the hostages, those several hundred that were taken in the attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th. There are ongoing protests that the Netanyahu government has basically forgotten about them in its attempt to eradicate Hamas. Several days ago, 2 were released to intense exultation. So there's real love of family. The bond under duress within a family becomes stronger. You can also see it with the Palestinians. In the initial month or 2 of the invasion of Gaza and the beginning of the genocide, Palestinian families intentionally dispersed. So if one of them was killed, the others would survive. But I've heard reports over the last couple of days that they're now doing the opposite. They're now all huddling together. So if they're going to die, they all die together. Last week, a family, wife, family, and 8 children were blown to bits by a drone. That's an example of the Palestinian love of family. There's also love going on even in the carnage of Palestine and the rich culture. I saw a report of some of the Palestinians, even under the duress of the high-tech massacres, slipping back to where they came from and picking up the sherds and fractured sculptures and relics of antiquity that have been blown up by the Israelis as they seek to erase Palestinian culture. Young people were seen picking them up, putting them in their pockets, probably for posterity in some museum someday. Just like today, we have shards of pottery in our museums, and we have no idea how the pot was broken. And then this is the day where love of your enemies takes on a particular poignancy. It's one thing to love a normal enemy. How were the Jews supposed to love the Nazis sitting in Auschwitz? Is that even possible? Is forgiveness possible in a Holocaust? We're told by the scriptures, at least in the Christian tradition, to love our enemies. And we know that that's true. But I think love at a time of genocide needs to go deeper and in a different direction, a different vector for it to have any meaning at all. And as I was reflecting on these matters, a saying of Muhammad out of the Hadith, the collection of sayings of Muhammad that are pondered like the Talmud is in Judaism alongside Torah. He was asked by his disciples one day, Master, tell us about compassion. And Muhammad said, one has to have compassion for the oppressed, and one also has to have compassion on the oppressor. And his disciples said, Muhammad, we know about compassion for the oppressed. What does compassion for the oppressor mean? And Muhammad said, you love the oppressor by forcing him to stop his oppression. One thinks of Jesus in the temple, a few days before he was betrayed and led till Golgotha with a cross on his shoulders. He went into the temple and watched the money changers and flew into a rage and threw them out of the temple, upsetting their tables and speaking strongly against the Pharisees and the Sadducees for allowing this desecration of the sacredness of Judaism. And then, says the scriptures, they took counsel among themselves to arrest him. I think love in a time of genocide has to be the toughest love in the world. Because you have to embrace the oppressor in a grip that forces them to stop the oppression. Sometimes you can do that with nonviolence, as Martin Luther King and Gandhi did. Sometimes you have to use violence, as Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu did. But it was in the name of love. It's an extraordinary thing to think about what love means in this moment. And I want to close by reading something from the Magnificat of Mary. You remember Mary after the visitation of the archangel Gabriel, who told her, that which is in you is not of human origin. It's the working of the Spirit. You shall have a child, and that child shall be called Emmanuel, and he will save many people from their sins. And Mary pondered that, and her only words at the time were, let it be done unto me according to thy will. And then she went to see her relatives, Elizabeth, her cousin, who also found herself pregnant. And it was at that time that Mary enunciated what has been called the Magnificat. And I'd like to just recite it as we ponder what love means on this day in a place called Gaza. My soul praises the Lord. My heart rejoices in God, my Savior, because he has shown his concern for his humble servant girl. From now on, all people will say that I am blessed because the powerful one has done great things for me. His name is holy. God will show his mercy forever and ever to those who worship and serve him. He has done mighty deeds by his power. He has scattered the people who are proud and think great things about themselves. He has brought down rulers from their thrones and raised up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away with nothing. He has helped his servant, the people of Israel, remembering to show them mercy as he promised to our ancestors, to Abraham and his people forever. At the heart of Christianity, at the heart of Judaism, and I believe at the heart of the psyche of every human being, is the Magnificat. Adulation of that spirit of the cosmos that raises up the humble, that feeds the hungry, that pulls down the proud and the rich and the oppressors. If Judeo-Christianity means anything in this moment of genocide in Gaza, our love for Israel is to get them to stop. And our love for the Palestinians is to help raise them up again. So that finally there is equity between Jew and Palestine, cousins of the house of Shem as Semites. And they can begin to love each other as all brothers and sisters should. with one heart, with one land, with a common future. So thank you, everyone. Happy Valentine's. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my very good friend and colleague, Tom Eddington, who along with Carson Kelly will convene this program on flourishing in our time. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, as always, for your opening comments. I especially appreciate your references to love and Valentine's Day. When we look throughout human history at cultures and the gifts that they have brought to humanity, there are certain countries, certain nations that stand out for their disproportionate amount of contribution to humanity. And I look to the ancient Greeks as one of those nations. One of the gifts that they've given us is 8 different definitions of love. And so when we think about Valentine's Day and what's happening in the world, it's easy to go to romantic love as the only definition, and yet there are 8 definitions we can live with. And it really speaks to the heart of the programming this week around human thriving, that we are hardwired as a species for collaboration and cooperation. It doesn't matter if you're looking through a psychology lens or a sociology lens or a neurobiology lens. We are hardwired for collaboration and cooperation. And the Greeks have given us 8 different ways that we can think about love for each other. It's the energy of the universe. It's who we are as a species. And so delighted to be here today, and welcome, Carson. Looking forward to another terrific conversation.
Hey, Tom. Yes, thanks. And Jim, thank you for all those amazing words or sentiment. It's very touching. And also, too, thank you again to you both, Tom, and to Jim, for being a part of, allowing me to be a part of the Humanity Rising podcasting efforts. I really appreciate the opportunity to continue to bring forward some of the most brilliant people that I've had the good fortune to meet and become colleagues with. So I'm excited rather to be doing that again today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Carson Kelly, and I'm the founder of Compassion 2.0. Compassion 2.0 is a collection of professionals who are trying to scale compassion through the intentional architecture of compassionate human experience that ultimately can be measured. We do this through the creation of compassionate and flourishing frameworks through both product development and organizational structure. Our community consists of organizational developers and HR leaders, product developers, neuroscientists, behavioral scientists, medical doctors, UX, UI designers, entrepreneurs, VCs, and more. And as has already been discussed, we are going to be looking at modern flourishing this week from the perspective of the global north. And we recognize that our Western modern organizations and culture, society, et cetera, have created really great challenges. And we see this reflected in the current state of affairs in our politics and the amount of mental, illness and depression and loneliness that's been recorded. It's off the charts, and just other sorts of indicators that everyone can see. We recognize that this is somewhat interesting for the global north, and that we have lots to learn from other cultures that have really understood flourishing deeply and haven't at any point in time had the challenges that we're facing. So lots to learn. So this week we continue to survey various things around the neuroscience of flourishing, group relationships, individual practices, ancient wisdom and modern framing, and financial funding. And so we hope that the listener will come away from this week with a sense of different topics that they might want to explore for themselves, things and practices and ideas that they might find uniquely beneficial to them, that resonate, and that can promote not just flourishing, but in a sense of to say themselves, but really also deep self-compassion, which in my mind also leads to greater compassion for others. So that's our intention. We hope this week is of service to you, the listener. The views expressed by the individuals on the show that come on are their own, and the program does, and their appearance in the program doesn't imply an endorsement of any other views or entities that they represent. I've asked our guests to join the conversation in a professional manner, really to just discuss their work and to share it with the audience. So that all being said, today I'm joined by two amazing people, one that I've known for years and one that I'm getting to know now, both Lori Hanau of the Global Roundtable Leadership Group, as well as Noor Katabi Stroud. Forgive me, I was practicing his last name. I want to make sure I was pronouncing it correctly. Maybe Noor, you can make sure you can let me know if I've done that or not. So if you guys would like to join us online, and you can take your videos off or turn your video on and turn on your cameras. All right, and your mics. It's nice to meet you. So first, to begin with, Noor, please, how did I do on the pronunciation of your name? Because I really want to make sure we have that correct.
Oh, you got it good. It's Noor
Okay.
El-Khattabi Stroke, but it sounded good.
Okay, great. I'll continue to work on it, and next time I'll make sure I get it. But anyway, thank you both for being here. We today are looking at what I've been calling pro-social teaming, and those are my words. It's not necessarily reflective of Lori or Noor in terms of how they think about their work, but it's around a broader notion of how do we bring humanity forward first in our relationships within an organizational structures, be it wherever we might come together to try to actually make something, create something, be it at work or a nonprofit or just a volunteer effort of any sort, really. So both of these folks are doing amazing work in those areas. So I thought we could dive in, and I'm going to pick on Lori first. So Lori, tell us just a bit about you and your path and what the Global Roundtable Leadership is and what your vision is, and just give us an overview.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone who's here today and who's listening and to being invited here. It's a real privilege to be here. And the call to love is such a powerful call. And I'm struck that we are also here on Valentine's Day. And as a first act of love, and I will certainly talk about myself in just a minute, but I'm wondering if we can start in a way of wholeness and love and care and nurturance by taking some breaths together. There's been a lot that's already been spoken, and just to integrate and be fully in our minds and our hearts and our spirits and our bodies, I just invite us to take 8 breaths together in whatever way is comfortable for you. And with the first 2 breaths, just breathe, if you can, in and out through your nose, or in through your nose and out through your mouth. And maybe wiggle your toes a little, or your fingers, just to feel your genius of your body. And just breathe. And with the next 2 breaths, breathe into your heart. Just use your imagination. Maybe put your hand on your heart if that feels comfortable. And just breathe into your own heart. To nurture yourself, to start with loving kindness for yourself. And with the next 2 breaths, breathe and smile, whether it's an inner smile or a physical smile. And notice what shifts. Just notice. What happens when you breathe and smile? And then with your final 2 intentional breaths here, breathe and think of something or someone that you are grateful for. Thank you. And in this way, may we be ourselves an embodied healing field, a beginning of a healing field, an atmosphere of connection and wholeness. So Carson, would you ask me again? To yeah. Can we
That was a great moment. Thank
start
you.
here?
Thank you for that. It's very appropriate. I was asking you who you are, why what brought you to the work, what is the work, and just a general arc of kind of what your efforts are in this.
Thank you. And so I'm Lori Carol Elizabeth Hanau. I carry the lines of my maternal side with Carol and my paternal side with Elizabeth. And I live in Keene, New Hampshire, in the Northeast, on Abenaki territory. And I'm a single mama of 2 beautiful sons and a daughter-in-law, but she's my daughter. And I'm the founder of Global Roundtable Leadership. I was raised in an entrepreneurial family, and I worked for 10 years within my father's corrugated manufacturing company. And it was an incredible time. We were actually one of the good family stories. There are many, many challenging stories of families that work together, but what pertains to today's conversation is that I knew that he was a great dad, and I knew before I came in to the business that he had a reputation as a great leader and friend and colleague to many. But I experienced it firsthand myself, and in the 10 years that I was there, I was the first woman selling corrugated boxes in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And we had an incredible culture because I would say at a top level, my father led with his humanity first and really saw us as equals before any roles and responsibilities in our humanity. We were equals first, and we were treated that way. And so I had a firsthand experience of what happens when we truly feel the equality of our humanity, and what it feels like to be seen and heard, and to have our opinions matter no matter what our roles, that we can tap into a knowing, that helps all in the organization and how we work together. And in calling on many other companies in sales, I saw so much soul loss in the cultures of so many companies. I was calling on all different kinds of manufacturing companies. And I was so taken and struck by the toxicity that existed in way too many of the cultures, and how so many of the folks within these systems, no one from top to bottom, all around, that nobody cared for this kind of toxicity, and yet it persisted. And then along the way of my path, I also had a growth spurt of consciousness, I would say, just a normal growth spurt. But the future and I seemed to become much better friends. And I saw these times coming. I had many dreams and nightmares of the world tipping and on fire, and the call to our global awareness, and I also saw groups that were flourishing and had greenery running up and down their faces, and we were in the next level of understanding about what it means to be human, and what it means to care and to work together and to contain our aggression, and to lead with care. And both of those times in my life were seminal in the way of having me create Global Roundtable Leadership. And we are a coaching and training company, and we support organizations and teams on how to lead together and share in leadership.
Right. Thank you for all of that. I've heard that story before, but I always love hearing it again. And it's always great. Beautiful. Thank you. So now, if I can pick on Noor a little bit, just to get a sense of, Noor, tell us a little bit about, your work and your role as executive director at Yes, and your path and so forth.
Thank you, Carson. It's good to be here. I want to start by thanking you, Jim, for your introductory remarks and for your love, your passion, and the compassion that came through your words. And as we are here today to talk about human flourishing, talk about the work that we do to bring humanity forward first, I think it's always really important to be aware of the global context of what's happening around us and to extend that love to the larger picture of humanity around us. And definitely the violence and genocide happening in Gaza is something that's been on my mind for the last 4 months. And so really grateful for the way that you started this session, Jim. My name is Noor Al-Khattabi Strauk. I am the executive director of an organization called Yes World. I am joining from Hatfield, Massachusetts, where I've been living for the past 4 years. I am married and have a 14-month-old son who has shifted my worldview and shifted my life in so many ways since he came, both for my personal journey, my work. I hail from Casablanca, Morocco, where I was born and grew up and lived for the first 31 years of my life before moving here to be with my wife and to move to the US. And I've been in the social change world since I was a teenager, volunteering in the community, working with students. I've always had the sense of responsibility of there's a personal ambition, but it's always connected to a community and a global ambition of how we can live in a world that is not just works for me and better for me, but is really better for all of us. And that element has always been essential for me, coming from the community background, the religious background, the family background that I grew up in. And the work that I do with Yes, Yes is a nonprofit organization that has been around for the past 34 years. Started in California, but has been doing work in many, many parts of the world. Yes works with young and multi-generational change makers throughout the world by supporting and nurturing people on the ground who are doing the essential work of bringing in social change, economic justice, environmental justice. We do this through a few different ways. Our flagship programs are called GEMS, and they are gatherings of a few days to a week where people come together around sharing a geographic area or identity or a sector that they work in. And the GEMS are really transformative events that create a shared field of inquiry that is inaccessible to folks in a lot of ways. I went to my first GEM back when I lived in Morocco, and I went to the Middle East GEM, which was in the beautiful desert of Wadi Rum in southern Jordan, and was with multiple other activists and artists and change makers from the region. And it was truly life-changing to drop into a space. I had been to a number of conferences, workshops, events talking about systemic change. And when I came to the GEM, one of the essential lessons was how we look at change and transformation in not just the systemic, but also the personal and interpersonal levels, and how those are deeply aligned and connected. And the healthiest and most consistent way of bringing about real change in real life is to work through all those three levels. And what that means in the GEM context is that these gatherings are not based on sharing of ideas or opinions or debates, as tends to happen in a lot of events where people come to talk about systems and systems change, but really they are co-created through the people that come to participate, which is why they're called GEMs, the metaphor from a musical jam, where people come in with their instruments and they create something beautiful, something that is unique, that will never be heard again, has never been heard before. And what we practice as GEMs, people take on and practice in their own communities, in their own organizations, and it is focused on empowering people to lead with empathy, to lead with full humanity, to lead with collaboration, and how we can bring in real tools of active listening, of conflict transformation into the areas where we interact, where we live. And this is based on a belief that has come through so many learnings through GEMS and through people who work in this network, that conflict is not really good or bad. Conflict is neutral and conflict is inevitable. Unless I isolate myself and I'm just by myself, as long as I'm in community, there will always be conflict because we live in the world through our different perceptions. And the veil of perception really shapes the way that we drop in the world, that we interact with the world. And a lot of time conflicts come from those different perceptions, and having the humility and the approach of active listening is what allows us to understand what our conflicts coming from, and to have a moment of choice instead of being a reactionary actor in a conflict situation that might come up in my family situation, in my work, in my systems change. How do we really take a moment to listen to the other person, to choose if this conflict is going to go into a breakdown or a breakthrough? So conflict is always really an opportunity. And so this is a lot of our work is bringing in people who are, as I said, on the field. Our program involves a lot of facilitated dialogue, exercises and tool sharing, sessions led by the participants themselves. And it's a really co-creative space. We've done about over 200 GEMS in the past 20 years across 15 countries, and we've had almost 4,000 participants from about 90 nations. And so what we do is also we continue to work with people who've come through GEMS and in the network by providing alumni events, by creating a network where people can collaborate, dropping together, continue to share, continue to rely on each other for inspiration, for impact, for support. And there's so much more, but I want to stop here and give it back to you, Carson, and see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know Lori's been through a jam. She's a jammer, and I have yet to be a jammer. And I don't know if Tom has or not, but we're hoping to actually do our first Compassion 2.0 jam. Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to scheme and plot around that and see what that looks like. That'll come from our conference that we're doing. Okay, shameless plug. We're doing a conference in April 3rd and 4th in San Francisco Bay Area called Flourishing in Culture. You can check it out at compassion2.com. We will have the great privilege to have both Nor and Lori at the event, and Lori's going to work some magic and Nor's going to work some magic, and hopefully from that event will come our Compassion 2.0 jam. That's what we're hoping to do. I have no idea what that means, but I'm super excited to do it. So just along those lines, Noor, when you talk about the jams, I understand that, it's like this spontaneous happening in a sense where a theme is put forward, like you mentioned, be it something related to a topic, related to a geography, related to identity, etc. And people come together and they then do something, and then they disperse and or continue to have relationship after the initial jam around this particular topic. So just very briefly, what would a result like? I know, for instance, one is coming up in Northern California. That's going to be a general jam. Is that right, or is that the environmental jam? I'm not sure which one will be.
Oh no, yeah, that's the North America jam that's coming up. It's a general jam for North America.
So let's say someone goes to a jam and they're there to jam. It's so funny because I have this linear, frame, constant reference, like, results and, this extractive thinking that I'm still trying to push aside. People show up and they jam, and then what happens? Is there a result outside of beautiful human relationship, which of course isn't trivial and of course is the point of it. But in terms of how to say the theme or the topic, what might be the result of a jam? In this case, the North American jam.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I also take this opportunity to answer a question that came in the chat about how I entered the jam world. And yes, and I think that the two answers can go together. To give an example of, as I said, my first jam was in 2012. I was in Casablanca, Morocco. I was deputy director of a community center that works with at-risk kids from underprivileged areas. And going to my first jam allowed me not only to take time to slow down, to reflect, to assess where I am going with, as I said, the alignment of my personal journey, my community work, and the systemic change work that I'm part of. But creating those connections within that network allowed me to tap into so many more resources, both in terms of continuing to be part of a network of people that has experienced something truly magical together, of being in a community, vulnerable space, raw, honest discussions that are not always accessible for folks outside of the facilitated and structured space that we create. So on a human level, that was incredibly life-changing to start to think of myself, the kind of conversations, the kind of openness that I've experienced at the jam. How do I take that into my relationship with my family, into my work environment, with my colleagues, with the volunteers that I was leading, with the kids that I was working with, and also into the systemic change work? How do I bring in really this feel into my conversations with the Ministry of Education when I was doing educational programs, or with people in other nonprofits? So that's one huge aspect of it, is the practice of a humanity first approach, and other results that come from it because of our continuation to hold the relationship. And what happens in a lot of jams is that people are able to connect the dots within the jam. Again, we do some networking, but it is very humanity-based networking, where people are able to connect with each other on the level of what work I am doing, what resources I have, what resources I am needing. And a lot of collaborations have come through that. In the past 20 years, there have been over 100 projects that came out through people who met at jams. Through our last couple of surveys, these projects have affected over 2 million people directly. And so I think creating a field where people are able to be so true to who they are, and to slow down and reflect and be in a place of decision making that comes from inspiration rather than obligation, has created so many opportunities for people to, with clarity, see where the opportunity is, see where their connection can happen. And so many folks have jumped into that as real life projects, but not to take the value from people who have been coming together in community just to continue to meet, to check in, to talk about their work, their journey, and how that has helped them into their individual projects, into their communities. And I feel this often people feel the impact a lot more when there are 2 or more people from the same organization who come to a jam, either together or who come to separate jams, and then they're able to recreate that feel within that organization, then start to spread it around. And this is also part of the work that we've been doing, especially in the last 5 years or so, is to take the jam outside of the jam. We still hold the events and invite people, but we've also been going and working with organizations, with teams that have retreats or team building exercises, and to offer a little bit of this social technology that we've been developing for over 30 years, and to offer this opportunity for people to see each other, see themselves, see the community of the people they work with in a new way. Remove a few masks. People often tend to be in a professional situation with like a very professional mask, and this is how I need to, behave. And sometimes it's really like groundbreaking to be like, no, you can just be yourself, and you can, at the top of your meeting, you can take a minute each and to say what is happening for you and how you're doing, and to have the trust that people can hold you in that. Some of those practices have been really transformative, both in the programming that we do and in the support that we do for organizations and teams. And so to finish answering the question from the chat, is that I came to the jam as a participant. I was invited to be a facilitator for the next year. I facilitated jams for about 10 years. And then about a year and a half ago, the executive director, Shilpa, my mentor and great friend, was transitioning out, and there was a new process. And so I applied, and I was very honored and very happy to be trusted with this position and to be trusted with guiding this incredible network of people who are doing amazing work in over a dozen countries in the world. And so that's the short story.
That's a great story. And it's so interesting too, because this whole notion of just allowing people to be humans, right? I mean, we come from this space of, particularly in the organizations that are, quote, designed to produce some sort of specific value, be it a manufacturing company in the Northeast or a nonprofit or whatever it might be. But humans that come together, it seems that we've come from this extractive frame where humans are resources, the earth is a resource, and it's all about consuming in this case, humans as resources or as capital to output value in some way. And by the way, let's leave all the humanity at the door, just plug in to your role within the organization. And so I'd like to turn the conversation to Lori. I've had the great good fortune now to be working more intimately with the GRTL team, just because I believe so much in the work that they're doing. And as I've been learning, I keep hearing these themes, because you were talking and I was just like, oh, there's Lori. Oh, there's Lori. Oh, there's more Lori. Like just it's just so right there in the sense of just this pro-social humanity. So Lori, why don't you, pick it up from here and tell us, what I'm hearing is so much of the work that you do at the Global Roundtable Leadership around bringing humans first and understanding the genius of the ensemble. So let's talk about that. Tell us about the genius of the ensemble.
Well, in order to speak to the genius of the ensemble, I want to take a minute to speak to how much we, in the current structures that we're in, and of having power over and under, and in the kind of hierarchical ways of being. It's interesting that the authoritarian leadership has bred the solo leader, or a small group of leaders. And the ensemble way of thinking is, how does that team move into a great flow in a way that can populate the teams throughout the whole organization? And to give an example of this, I want to talk for a minute about a real estate company that we did these, what we call learning journeys with, and 92 employees across 37 offices in 4 different companies under the umbrella of residential, commercial, a school, and a title company. And all of these individual offices, real estate offices across the 3 states, saw themselves as solo, with their office and then headquarters in nearby, and what they were interested in doing. And we started with the leadership team, and then they wanted to fan this out to their whole organization. Is we had, and many, most of these different offices had never met each other across the offices. They did not see themselves as one whole system. And so they did not see themselves as a grand ensemble. and so they went on a learning journey that we co-designed with them, and that was the practice of building quality relationships throughout the whole organization, and the practice of leading with our humanity. And so, as Noor has said, practices of deep listening, of curiosity, of practicing what it means to be uncomfortable and vulnerable, and to trust that it's not going to be a therapy session, that we can manage this and actually grow brilliantly, that we start to access more bravery, more honesty, more care, more connection for each other, which actually starts to have us all get smarter together in all different kinds of ways. And so I'm going to use kind of a system speak or nature speak. We cross-pollinated. We put teams together across the whole system. Also had something what we call the compassionate accountability practice, where they met in trios to be each other's mentors and guides, and small ensembles of having each other's back, giving each other feedback, encouraging each other to strengthen in the practices that they articulated as a team and they cared to develop together. By week 5 out of 17 weeks, the roof started to come off the place. And what has been so important to me is in kind of my soul, even as a jammer, and all the different kinds of retreats I've gone on to cultivate my own development and to be in other groups of connection. That it's wonderful and so important and essential to be on retreat, but we could tend to lose a lot of that in the day-to-day workplace of whatever we're bringing from elsewhere. And if we only go alone or with one other person, and so I centered this work in the workplace because we are so sick at work. There are so many statistics about how the toxicity and the illness at work. And I'm always struck by the Gen Zers and the Gen Xers, the data point that it's the largest subgroups in our human history who care about purpose and meaning, and won't just go to work for the dollar or for a sense of, if there's like an extractive way of being together, that there is much going on that has us realizing how important and essential it is to cultivate not only our humanity, but our connection and the way we work together. And so I wanted to bring these practices in a way that could be applied day in and day out in the workplace, applied to the work. And we get letters from all over of, oh my gosh, I brought these practices home to my family. We're practicing these with my family, even thinking as an ensemble, as a musical group or a sports group, or geese, and how do we show up and care for each other? How do we have each other's backs? How do we start to develop trust and dignity and respect as the ground of us, not something that we're only reaching for or trying to reach for? And how do we become embodied? And it takes practice. And so I'll just name one more and then I'll step back so we can share our voices here, is that one of the practices is we are so conformed in the workplace to lead as experts. And we think that if we lose our expertise, that we're not going to be valuable or that we won't be taken seriously. And so one of our core practices for a team is to start to practice leading as learners. And what happens when we become curious, when we move into a sense of discovery, when we bring a new mind and an open mind and an open heart. But it takes practice because we're so conformed to lead as experts. And so when a group or a team, day in and day out, apply to their workplace and apply to their work at hand, start to practice these ways of being, I am inspired over and over and over again. It's not easy. And yet we are so thirsty to be in these ways of being together. And we don't want to go back to other ways. And so we become willing to be more vulnerable. We start to feel, build a sense of safety with each other. We start to bring our voices forward and our care in so many different ways. So I'll pause here, but that is where you start to build an ethos of a grand ensemble. There's a different kind of harmony that literally starts to come in, and it is a form of our intelligence. And an intelligence of being human.
Thank you for that. Jim, I want to leave some space for you here. I do want to, if something's up for you, and if not, no worries, but I did want to just comment. We had a similar thing, how to say, in Compassion 2.0, when we had our last conference, which was on compassion and product. We had about 70 people, and we went into this very intentional space to create psychological safety as much as we could. So we very intentionally asked people, every single person had to agree to hold space for anything that came up for people, so forth. We moved people around to intentionally try to break down in-group, out-group associations, and because people tend to cluster within, the group. So we kept mixing up the salad, so to speak. And it was very effective. Of the reporting that we got back, and this is the first time we had done this, but the reporting that we got back with people, it's amazing. I found my people. I've developed, 4 to 5 new really serious business relationships, et cetera. And I think that is really more of an attribute of just how amazing the people were in the room. Not myself included in that per se, but just the brilliance. And so it feels like that there's this expression when people are given that space and they're allowed to be humans and they're allowed to be brilliant and allowed to be vulnerable, and they know that there's agreements in place to support both of those kinds of things. It's like I just keep having this vision. It's like a nucleus explosion. It's like the parts all of a sudden form into this spherical thing of relationship, and that's like there's multiple different connections and so forth. It's like this explosive activity. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that. And Laura, if you have something to add.
Carson, I do, and it's back to what I didn't say about the it's not hierarchical structures in themselves that but it's the way that we have thought about just one person or a small group that is leaving so much. It's like so much gold on the table.
Exactly.
There's so much waste because we're not getting at that. We're not getting at that genius that exists throughout the whole organization. And I believe it actually, I'm going to use the word matures us, like that when we shift from power over and under to power with and leadership with each other, I find that starts to dispel the silos, that starts to break down the ways of separation and silos, and people start, wanting to hear what's going on in each other's meetings. They start to connect the dots to all the different ways the teams are working, and how can, if I'm with you over here, then how does that support how we're working here? And we've had people who said, "Oh my gosh, this." This member of my team that I've been complaining to my boss about, for months, I have not realized my own responsibility. And I have just been in complaining mode. What can I do in a generative mode of being compassionately responsible for what is the right kind of dialogue to try to, find the places of care and connection with each other. And then when that happens, it is amazing how much of the drama and the mishigosh, fall away, and then we find the ways to move through our challenges together, and then that moving through our own challenges together helps us to solve the challenges of the organizations together. Like we become so much smarter, and so I find it dispels the fracturing, and so I thank you all. Wanted to add
I know
that.
you could go forever, and I could.
I know.
You for hours. No, don't. No. Please don't.
Well, I want to hear,
there's
other wonderful voices.
I'm curious, Tom, is there anything that's up for you on this? I know you've had such tremendous experience working with so many people in a previous incarnation of your professional life. So just anything for you?
Yeah, there are several pieces that are coming up. So one is there's a psychotherapist, Terrence Real, who's written about this, and a book, one of his more recent books is called Us, where he talks about whether it's an interpersonal relationship, organizational, or even societal. And he's been speaking quite a bit about the patriarchal society that we live in. But it's a wonderful read, and I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in going deeper, either on a personal level, a relational level, organizational, or societal. It's a wonderful, easy read, and it's beautifully written. So I would just put in a little plug for Terrence Real and his work. But I think on an organizational, societal level, and it goes back to some of Jim's comments at the beginning of the show and the conversation throughout. Since 2020, the 5 richest men, and they are all men, their net worth has shot up by 114%. And the 5 billion of the world's population have become poorer. And so we can't ignore, I love, the work that you're doing, Lori, and the work you're doing, Nor, in addressing this, but we've got some systemic issues that are at play as well. And, to not talk to the economics of the world, and the pro-social hardwiring that we have as a species, and we're bumping up against that over and over and over again. And, Lori, I really appreciate your comments about the, Gen Z in particular being so committed to purpose. And a good friend and colleague of mine, Aaron Hurst, wrote the book on the purpose economy several years ago, recognizing that trend that was emerging. And it continues to keep me hopeful as a human when I look at, people in their teens and their 20s and their 30s in particular, and what they're doing in the world, that they're operating in a way that's more consistent with what is my understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah. And Tom, so I started to get very, very restless with even though there are a number of organizations kind of on the ground, if you will, that we were working in, and many over the past 24 years across the sectors. We've been agnostic to the sectors. But I started to come up with, to really see the image of leadership teams around the world coming into cohorts, and with their leadership teams, because they're the ones that can have the key to opening the power for the rest of their organizations. And so we now do learning journeys that are cohort based, and with leadership teams, up to 12 teams at a time. And our first beta, and with Shilpa Jain, who's giving some of her time on our team, because we have been sisters for many, many years, and some of the Yes Jammers teams, that we had teams from India and Pakistan and Egypt and Turkey, and 2 Canadian teams, 1 Indigenous led, and 6 teams from the US across the 6 sectors. And to see these 58 people working within these teams, and then in a cohort framing where they met 3 times across the 12-week journey from around the world, for them to see and experience that the same challenges that they are having within their systems and within their leadership and are happening, are the same, are the universal common challenges to all of us. And to see the influence that one of the organizations, actually in Turkey, Pakistan, they took one of the gratitude practices to 300 of their employees, and had them tell each other, write down what they feel is such a treasure. What's one treasure that the other person brings to the table in their workplace? And this one practice broke open that part of the system, and they started their meeting in circles, and they're just like, and I think that we can go into, I so hear you. And I hear the essentialism of focusing at a global scale, as Jim and Nor and all of us have been touching on. But in that way of how can we do what we can do right in our own places of work and in our own communities, as Nor is sharing, and that when it can be so overwhelming if we only stay in the magnitude without looking and practicing, taking on the responsibility for what we and our collectives can do, and to be willing to practice and to be willing to learn and grow together. And for me, that is an answer. It's a response and an offer that I think is why Nora and I are so passionate about work, about these communities all over, and the influence that we might offer as a shift of consciousness, because this is a massive shift of consciousness that we're talking about out of the ways that we have been in so far. But there's a lot pushing on that, that affords us more and more opportunity. And it seems that we humans need to suffer in order to shift.
Yeah, and yet, I go back to a comment Nora made earlier. It's a very thin veil, and we can see through it, and we can remove that veil, and we're choosing not to. We're clinging on to, and I think part of it, goes back to work by Francis Weller in The Wild Edge of Sorrow and others, where we haven't honored the grief, the trauma. And
Yes.
until we can fully process that grief, fully process that trauma, are we fully able to remove that veil and live into who we are, and be able to thrive in the ways that we've been speaking to this week.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
To add on
I know,
that,
and
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lori. Please go ahead.
no, I was just going to invite Nora to speak on that, and you, Carson, and then I've got something to
Yeah.
say there too, but I'd like to come in behind you both.
Sure. Nora, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Tom, for that for that point and that context that you're bringing. And I agree. I think that's incredibly important and essential to keep in mind. I don't think we do this work in separation of the larger picture. I think this is very complementary to our understanding and awareness of what's happening in the world. And so when you bring in that example, and I think this is like the crux of the matter, the upward transfer of wealth that we've seen in the last few years with the extractive economy, with the way our different societies are set up. This is something that's been going on in the global south for decades, but now even in the US, we're seeing the gap between wealthy, comfortable, and people who are living paycheck to paycheck become wider and wider in the last few years. And I think that's, to me, that's the driving force. That's the understanding of what we're up against, and understanding it, confronting it, but also having the power to reimagine a new world. I think there's a lot of work that gets done in the resistance of what is, and that is complemented and needs to be complemented by a reimagining and a recreation of a new system. They happen at the same time. But as Lori was saying, I think it's really important for us to be able, as individual change makers, as communities of change makers, to situate ourselves within the grander picture of social change, of where the world is and where we want it to be. And it can get really overwhelming to see all of these things and look at myself or my small team as what can we really do. But part of what we do at GEMS and movement building that happens within other organizations and the movement is to connect these dots, to understand that there's a fabric of people who are working and have a lot of love for this world and want to see a regenerative and balanced and just world. And how do we find ways, as you mentioned, Tom, you mentioned the choice, and I think bringing the choice and the intentionality in our actions and in how we move forward in our work is the real need for having true impact. I think this is also an example that I've been noticing, talking about for the past few years, especially in the US context, especially in the progressive movement, is there's a need to help organizations become more resilient. There's so much injustice happening, and there's so much that drives us apart. And I've noticed a lot of people who are maybe united in a vision, or the goal that they're working towards is similar, but teams fall into a lot of conflicts that end up breaking them apart. There's a lot of burnout in the social change world. There's a lot of sometimes puritanism and maximalism that makes it really hard for people to situate themselves and to see their work as worth something. And so part of the work that we do is, as part of this fabric of movement building, is to help organizations be really resilient, have that shared foundation of what is it that we're trying to accomplish together, understand that we don't all see it in the same way, and we can't all see it the same way, and be ready for when conflict comes up, whether that's just a personal conflict that happens for folks when maybe they're not in a good place in the day and they're being more reactionary, or whether that's a larger conflict of beliefs and worldviews and how do we see things, and have people having the tools to drop in with each other and to hold the difficult conversation in a meaningful way, in a slow way, in true listening. Like so much of my learning through jams and through this work is that the basic technology of listening is so inaccessible to so many people and leads to a lot of breakdown. Just listen to what somebody said without preparing a retort and an answer, and actually listen, take a moment, maybe reflect it back, say, Lori, I heard you say this and this and this. Does that honor what you are sharing? And take a moment to truly have an understanding of, makes it so much easier to move through difficulties and to move through conflicts rather than dealing with two different issues without fully understanding where the conflict comes. And so, yeah, as I said, I think the systemic change is connected to the community work, is connected to the interpersonal view, because we are communal beings, we are collaborative beings at our core, but we also can only live the world through our own very eyes. And having compassion for each other and having the ability to slow down instead of reacting without understanding really the source of what people are sharing, or freezing people, judging people by one movement, by one action, by one something that they say. Those are all pitfalls that are happening within the social change movements, and that make it really hard to confront the big issues that we're having. And so doing that, empowering people who are on the ground, making change happen, to be regenerated, to be empowered, to be able to know that they can make a difference, that they can collaborate, that they have partners across the globe, across the field. That is a really essential element of being able to work against the big shifts that we're seeing that are leading our world in more of a division and strife.
Yeah, well said. The things that I wanted to just mention earlier, again, you said a lot of the same things, so I'm going to kind of repeat it in a different way. But it really touches back, I think, to Tom's earlier point about this wealth transfer. One of the things that I reflect on, there's really kind of two things actually that kind of drive my reflections right now, is to talk about the U.S. again in the sense of the wealth transfer. I've read, and forgive me, I wish I could quote the source, but something like the top 400 families were holding about 25 years ago $1.5 trillion in value in about 25 years or so ago. And now, from what I understand, it's now $4.5 trillion 25 years later in accumulated wealth holding by the top 400 families or entities in this United States. And when you think about the transfer, I think to Tom's point of that amount of, value as perceived by money, that comes from somewhere. And it feels like it's coming from the social media platforms and the exhaustion and the depression and the loneliness and all of the things that that money has come as a result of depleting and taking as a resource our social emotional well-being, our Earth's well-being, our political challenges and divisions that we have, which are so largely based on fear. And it just feels like we continue to migrate towards and faster towards this endpoint by which the extraction there won't be anything left to extract at some level. It'll just continue, and we will be depleted and exhausted. And so I kind of hold that, and I think about that, and I think about what a new modality is shaping up to look like. And then again, I'm reminded of the metaphor of the next Buddha, right? So this is, as I understand it, the next Buddha doesn't come as an individual. The Maitreya Buddha, which is the Buddha of love, which is, I guess, appropriate for today. But the Buddha of love in the Maitreya myth is a community of people. It's a group. It doesn't, that brilliance and that enlightenment doesn't reside in an individual, but it resides in the collective. And it feels to me like, regardless of if you're interested in Buddhism or not, or if that resonates with you or not, but it feels to me that principle is what's now really starting to show up and getting us from one place to the next. Again, also to Tom's point, and this is something that we were discussing yesterday, there's a lot of pain that people hold. There's a lot of suffering that people hold, and a lot of challenge that I think if people felt seen, again, to this point of having these conversations, if they could feel seen, even not necessarily resolving that pain, but at least being seen to holding it at some level or experiencing it, that there might be a release, there might be this shift that would allow us ultimately to then be able to have that empathic bridge to the other and to be able to start to move past the trauma and the healing or the pain. Anyway, totally random thoughts. Tom,
Well,
any response to that, or anybody any response?
Yeah, a couple of things, and thank you, Carson. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, and I've done work in this area. 75% of the families who accumulate and have accumulated wealth, not just in the U.S. but outside the U.S., go shirt sleeve to shirt sleeve in 3 generations. And so part of what needs to be addressed there, and I've been to and have spoken at conferences where these families are represented, and the younger generation who are the inheritors of this wealth are looking for different ways to live. They're looking for different ways to be in relationship with that money and in society. And they're exploring alternatives. And part of what is needed is, going back to this conversation we're having today, is very, very much to authors like Lynn Twist, who have written The Soul of Money and her latest book, Living a Committed Life. It's retelling the story of what it means to be human, and how do we, as we spoke to yesterday, how do we live in community? How do we live with each other? How do we not focus on defining who I am and having our own personal identity, but being in relation to others? And until we can fully embrace that new old story, we're going to continue to see these struggles.
Well said. Lori, anything for you on that?
Yeah, because there's a couple different strands here. I want to speak to 2 of the rivers. One is all the transfer of wealth, and I've had the great privilege of being a mentor and guide to a number of the youth and the networks. And these networks are not, are more private. Some of these are more private places for these youth leaders within their families to have a space to learn and to want to see how they can walk their talk with their values and what does this mean, and what do they consider. And this is what I was going to say, we don't hear enough about. And Carson, when you said it might be, like what might be when if we act this way, it is right now in pockets all over. And what is happening is that we are rising, and I believe even with what you're on with Compassion 2.0, right? It's bringing more and more and more of these organizations, of these sectors, including the sectors of wealth, who care to show up differently, that, and how do we practice again, and that how do we see each other and find each other, because that brings out the next level of being heartened and strengthened and sharing our power, our resources, and our beings together. And Tom, want to speak to a minute. Trauma is its own, trauma itself, is a massive, massive topic. And I also love Joanna Macy's work and how, along with every book that has been said here, is honestly a tremendous resources, and also in the chat, just tremendous resources. And then how do we apply it? And what is the practice of, and the way of not just skimming the surface or numbing out or turning away from the great pains of our society, of what exists sometimes within our family, within ourselves, and and to have a broken heart and to be able to not go down the rabbit hole of, you know, of that darkness is a practice. And I speak to many, and we work with an indigenous tribe and their organization that have had such, the first time I talked with one of the leaders there, I actually had to excuse myself for the rest of the afternoon because her sharing of her story of her trauma was so extraordinary. It took me a moment to find my own, a few hours, to find my own balance. And yet she says, we don't want a trauma bond. And so these ways of caring, of honoring, of practicing being together in our differences across the genus of our diversity, the practice of turning toward each other supports how we can heal and heal, and then the trauma starts to heal. There's, again, I don't want to trivialize what it takes to heal trauma, but again, that ecosystem of care with each other is a support system. And I want to just name one more thing, is that I can't tell you how often when we have leadership teams share their stories with each other about even how they got to the current job they're in and what their road was, and that they could work for each other for years and not know each other's stories. So often, people have come from traumatic dynamics in workplaces, and it's not being discussed. And so it's a way that it's building on the trauma, and so when we humanize our workplaces, again, there's a healing that starts to happen. And I just don't want to underestimate the power of what it means to lead together with our humanity and the healing ecosystems that are a part of this consciousness. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lori. And I think kind of on that note, I think we can transition. We have to be mindful of the time. A couple of other thoughts, and I'd like to, in a few minutes, Tom, if you have anything to add at the end here, that'd be great. But first off, Lori, in terms, just shameless plug. So GRTL, Global Roundtable Leadership, is offering learning journeys for organizations.
Yes.
And
yes.
As you mentioned, are 12-week journeys that are done over a period of time, take an hour or two a week, depending on the situation. Coaches are involved. It's oftentimes it's or a team led. And where can people learn more about this? At the Global Roundtable Leadership website, correct?
Yeah. Yes, you're asking and supporting me with the answer. Thank you for that. So yes, we have a learning journey coming up on March 11th. We have another one coming up in April. And if you want to have your team work together on how to build these skills and capacities, go to globalroundtableleadership.com.
Well, I just put that in the site or in the chat for everybody.
Oh, thank you.
And then just to blatantly put Nora on the spot, because why not? We talked about, of course, different what am I looking for? Jams that are coming up that are already scheduled. One that, again, I shamelessly plug for Compassion 2.0. But a thought comes up to me is, I wonder if there would be space for Humanity Rising Jam. There are a lot of people in this community that are super cool and thinking about groovy things. And anyway, so just to, like I said, put you on the spot without any forewarning in front of lots and lots of people. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are might be, and if that's something that people were interested in, could they reach out to you if that was something, even if you wanted to support? But just a thought.
Oh, thank you for putting me on the spot there. I say, let's do it. This is actually the model of how so many jams have come about. It's been really organic. Jams have started mostly as like world jams and people from many different parts of the world coming in. And those took place for a few years. And then each person wanted to take the jam into their community. So from the world jams came the North America jam, the Middle East jam. And from those came a lot of jams. We have about 30 jam teams across 10 countries. And so this is the perfect way to do it. It's people who feel this work, who want to create a community together, who want to be intentional about what we're doing. So I'm all in for a Humanity Rising Jam.
Cool. I hope that can come about. And what would be the website for people to learn more about jams that we can put in. Thanks, Lori, to put into shout out. You want to put that in the chat, and then
Yes,
people are interested, they could reach out through the website, presumably.
absolutely. So I put in both the website right here, yesworld.org, and also I've pasted this already, but this is a little slide I prepared with some info and a lot of links that people can click in, learn more about what is the jam, what are some upcoming events that we have, our principles, and so a lot of information right on that slide.
Great, fabulous. Well, thank you both for your time and for your work, most specifically. With that, I'd do two things. I'd invite Jim back in to join us, and Tom, if you have any last thoughts that you'd like to add before we turn it over to Jim.
Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you. Did you want to start, Tom, with any last thoughts that you have, or maybe
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, I want to just underscore, possibly because of my preoccupation with what's going on in Gaza, but also I think generically, given my reading of Gabor Mate's last book called The Myth of Normal, in which he made the point that's been touched on, but I think is worth all of our contemplation as we consider flourishing of any nature in our modern world. And that is that, as he recounts, and I urge and encourage everyone to read his book, it's an extraordinary work.
It is.
Trauma permeates every aspect of modernity. And we are so traumatized, according to Dr. Mate, that we consider trauma normal. We traumatize women while they're with child. We traumatize babies and mothers when they're born. We traumatize them as they're, growing up. The corporate world traumatizes. The media traumatizes. Social media in particular traumatizes. And we get so habituated to it that we consider it normal. Therefore, our notion of flourishing is distorted into an edification of trauma itself. And we pass it down from generation to generation. So, that was what was striking me, Tom, when you were laying out in your original comments that, listen, we got to pay attention to this. People are hurting out there. And I would say everybody's hurting everywhere, whether you're Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, or the entrepreneurs in South Africa or China. We're living in a world teetering on the brink of self-destruction. And that is the kind of the rock against which all systems break up, because they're almost never taken into account. One of the points that Gabor makes, and I'll close with this, you go to a doctor, you go to your job interview, you go to almost anything, nobody even asks you about your trauma. So there's a conspiracy of silence around the most fundamental elephant in the room. So anyway, I thought this is worth bringing up, Carson, because flourishing and trauma are two sides of the same coin. And how we understand that is an extraordinarily powerful portal through which we all must tread. And I've been illuminating Gaza. And tomorrow I'm going to tell the story of Hamas as an exemplification of this principle. So anyway, I think it's been a wonderful conversation, and thank you both, Lori and Noor, and would love to do a Humanity Rising jam. That's a great idea, Carson. Maybe Nor, you and I can talk, and since you're the jam guy,
I'm
and
a jammer. I'll be there.
you're a jammer too. Well, then let's do it
Yes,
again.
yes,
Let's
then
do this
Let's
again.
do
Yeah,
it.
facilitator. Yeah, let's do it. Thank
So
you.
any comments, maybe just quick comments from you, Lori and Noor, then Carson, and then Tom, and we can just wrap this up. Rich day for Valentine's, rich topic for Valentine's. The
Right.
broken heart,
Yeah.
broken
Yeah.
heart, who wants the love, but is so traumatized we don't quite know how.
Who does love,
Yeah.
who does love, but does not have, necessarily has had the teachings or examples. And so here is to us all being committed to being examples and remembering that that most people everywhere want the killing to stop, want the hurting to stop, and want to live into our humanity. And so I just want to say thank you for creating this space, and Jim and Tom and Carson and Stan and is it George to support us, to support Nora and I in the way you have, and the hospitality that you've been in, and for us to be in this message today is such an honor. And thank you to this community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori.
Here's
You're doing
to
great
us.
work out there, boy.
Oh,
Doing great work. You're in the trenches.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same here.
I'm a trenches gal. Thank you, Nor, and thank
A jammer
you,
in
Nor.
the trenches.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm just going to repeat that so glad to be part of this conversation and so grateful for your comments, Jim. Both the keeping the context of what's happening in Gaza, that's something that's been on my mind, on my heart for the past 4 months, and connecting that to the world, to our work, to what we do, not as a point of despair and giving up, but as a point of like, this is needed. We need to do this more. And what you mentioned, and I put it in the chat, hurt people hurt people. Every violence comes from trauma, and taking the silence away and opening the way for people to heal themselves is the way to move forward. And the other side of hurt people is that healing people are healing people and are creating systems that are healing people. And so every little thing that we can do, it might seem like a drop in a big ocean, but that's how the ocean is formed. This work is so important. These communities are so important. So I'm really glad to be here, to having this conversation, and so excited for our Humanity Rising Jam and Compassion 2.0 Jam to keep expanding, to keep connecting, and to keep seeing each other as partners in bringing in the world that is filled with justice and that has space for broken hearts to mend and to honor the cracks and to see each other's brokenness and heal together.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Tom.
Yeah, I just want to thank Lori and Nora for your work. And what I especially appreciate is that, your work is informed by your own personal journey. And it would have been very easy for each of you to choose to just do your own work. And yet you have clearly done that, as well as found a way to bring it into the world in a bigger way. So I want to honor and thank you both for what you're up to.
And for me, not much else to add to all of these beautiful statements. I think one of the things that I would say to you, though, Jim, is I really appreciated you bringing in the Magnificat. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I didn't grow up Catholic. I wasn't familiar with that's those statements, and had a chance to look, and it's such a beautiful challenge and such an incredibly poetic call to compassion. I would say that the thing to also lean into what Noor was saying is that I think, trauma, of course, it's like I always say, trauma is like ice cream. Everyone has their own flavor, and that they have, so to speak, right? But we all have it. And I think it's just a question of, maybe we can give ourselves the permission to acknowledge that and to acknowledge that for ourselves and into others, and come from a place where people can ultimately, have space to heal and to move forward. So anyway, that's all I'll say. So, but thank you, Jim, for the opportunity to be here. Appreciate it.
That's your line about we all have our own flavors of suffering. It reminds me of the great opening of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, where he says, happy families are all happy for the same reason. Unhappy families are all unhappy for different reasons. And I think that's true. I think that's very, very true. There's something about happiness that's unifying and universal. And there's something about unhappiness that atomizes us into a sense of victimhood of what we have suffered and why we are unhappy. So that's a profound insight, Carson. Thank you so much for that. Do you want to say something quickly about tomorrow?
Oh, sure. Tomorrow, we're going to be speaking. The theme is ancient wisdom in a modern frame. So we have with us Scott Snibbe, who is going to be talking to us about his new book, How to Train a Happy Mind. Scott is, in addition to being a three-time exited venture capitalist-backed founder and also a world-recognized multimedia artist with installations in various museums, he's truly an amazing guy. He's also a very deep Buddhist practitioner and teacher, and has really, he runs a podcast called Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment, and he's really looking at how we secularize, in this case, Tibetan Buddhist meditative and mind training practices first. And then the second group is Shivani Modi and Ankur Jain are coming from a company called Seeker, and they're in India. And they've spent 8 years with a yogic master deconstructing the Vedas and the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and then reconstructing them into a secularly framed AI that when it asks you a series of questions about your energy and your sleep patterns and various things, and you answer it, then it comes back and gives you breath work and or asana, pranayama, and asana practices to bring yourself back into balance. And it works.
Love it. Love it.
It's one of the most profound things I've ever seen. I've gone through their class. I've seen the back end of it.
Wow. Truly
profound. So anyway, it'll be an interesting conversation tomorrow.
Great stuff. This is why I love Humanity Rising. It just gets better and better. And it's only Wednesday.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Carson, so much. Tom, Anur, and Lori for a very heartful Valentine's Day dialogue. It's been very illuminating. The community has loved every minute of it. So thank you so much. And that'll bring us to a close, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. You received it in your Zoom reminder for today. And then we'll see you tomorrow, as Carson just indicated, for how ancient wisdom can inform, even through AI, a sense of flourishing. That's no mean accomplishment. Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.